welcome to a brand new video on my channel. Today I present to you part 1 of the story, Pandora and the Eternal War. This is a reimagined version of the tale, and I truly hope you'll enjoy it. If this fresh take on the story resonates with you, which was crafted with the support of ChatGPT, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like. Just to clarify, the story itself is something I came up with, and ChatGPT helped me shape it. Even though I used AI, it still required a lot of effort to refine, piece together, and bring to life, especially when generating images with another AI. Let me give you an idea of how much work this involved. I had to use ChatGPT to create prompts for a separate AI image generator, sift through the best ones, transfer them to my tablet, and then integrate everything into the video. I also had to make sure the entire narrative flows smoothly, avoiding any plot holes or inconsistencies. So, yeah, it's a lot of work. If you'd like to support me, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed to the channel and shared it with a friend. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into the story.
Pandora sprinted through the forest, her slender figure darting effortlessly between the trees. Her long, silver hair streamed behind her like a comet's tail, whipping around in the wind as she leapt from trunk to trunk. Each jump sent up a brief flurry of dust and leaves, only to be erased by her swift passage. She moved like a shadow, her eyes, lilac stars, glowing with fierce determination. Suddenly, she spotted a deer grazing quietly in a clearing. Pandora, moving with the speed and precision of a predator, descended from the trees in a blur. With a quick, powerful leap, she pinned the deer to the ground, her claws digging into the earth. The mist around them shimmered with the occasional glint of purple crystals, their dangerous beauty unnoticed as Pandora focused on her prey. Carefully avoiding the dangerous crystals, Pandora bit into the deer's neck, drawing a modest amount of blood. She was cautious not to cause too much harm, intent on ensuring the deer remained alive despite the shock. As she drank, the deer trembled, but its life was spared. Satisfied, Pandora released the deer and sprang back into the trees. Her claws dug into the bark as she climbed with practiced ease. The wind wove around her pale, slightly muscular form, her hair, a radiant cascade of silver moonlight, glinting as she ascended. She leapt from branch to branch with grace, her movement a fluid dance in the mist. The fog, only 5 meters high, was left behind as she rose through the dense canopy. Reaching the top of the forest, she briefly caught sight of her home, an enormous tree with a treehouse as grand as its trunk. Her speed allowed her to see the passing trees with crystal clarity. Each jump sent tiny splinters flying from the bark. Dressed in a short brown jacket and shorts, she felt no chill, her pointed teeth and ethereal appearance marking her as more than human. Finally arriving at her home, Pandora clung to a thick branch that supported one of the wooden platforms. As she crawled up, she pressed her claws into the wood. Suddenly, the part of the platform she had often clung to broke away with a loud crack and fell to the ground below. Pandora nearly plummeted, but managed to catch herself with her other hand and swung back onto the platform with a sharp, decisive movement. Her heart raced from the near fall, and she breathed heavily, realizing how much damage a fall could have caused. As she recovered, she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw a striking woman with long black hair and red eyes, her skin as pale as Pandora's own. Her mother, dressed simply in a loincloth, had apparently just been sunbathing. She approached Pandora, a thoughtful expression on her face as she reached her daughter. Pandora landed lightly on the platform, her eyes meeting those of her mother, Serafina, who was standing with an air of concern. The wisps of her long black hair fluttered around her pale face, framed by the faintest glimmers of sunlight. Serafina's eyes, a striking red, held a mix of relief and disapproval as she observed her daughter. "You must be more careful, Pandora," Serafina said firmly, her voice echoing the depth of her worry. "The way you swing up the tree is too risky. A fall like that could seriously injure you." Pandora rolled her eyes, her gaze lingering on her mother's striking figure. Serafina's skin, as pale as the moonlight, was marked with numerous scars, and her toned muscles were evident beneath her simple loincloth. Despite her mother's stern words, Pandora could not ignore the beauty and strength that radiated from her. "I get it, Mom," Pandora said, her voice edged with irritation. "I understand." She brushed past Serafina, who, in a flash, extended her sharp nails to grasp Pandora's wrist. "You need to listen to me," Serafina insisted. "Next time, use the rope ladder or find a safer way up. This reckless behavior has to stop." Pandora, though annoyed, nodded in agreement. All right, all right." As she moved across the platform towards the sunlit spot where her mother had been lounging, she noticed a large, broad branch extending from the main tree. Her father, Elias, emerged from the treehouse, his short black hair tousled and his green eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. Seeing the small spat between his wife and daughter, Elias approached with a bemused expression. "What's the matter?" he asked, catching the tail end of the exchange. Serafina sighed, glancing at Elias. Pandora refuses to listen. She keeps taking these dangerous risks with her climbing. Elias, understanding the concern, nodded. "I get it. We've been living in this chaos zone for 16 years now. It's no wonder she's eager to explore beyond our small world. It's not easy for her." Pandora continued her path across the thick branch, feeling the rough texture under her feet. Her instincts guided her carefully, preventing any misstep. She climbed into a fork between two branches, gazing out over the sprawling forest. The sun's reflection danced off the green canopy, stretching to the distant horizon. Mountains rose faintly in the distance, and the occasional flicker of chaotic crystal light sparkled through the trees. Feeling a yawn coming on, Pandora was growing tired. She noticed the hammock suspended between the two branches and decided to rest. Ignoring the daunting height below, she settled into the hammock, letting its gentle sway lull her into relaxation. As Pandora lay in the hammock, the gentle sway provided a rare moment of calm. Her mind churned with thoughts, a turbulent mix of curiosity and frustration. She stared up at the forest canopy, the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves, and her thoughts drifted to the life she had known for the past 16 years. "Why are we always stuck here in this E-ranked chaos zone?" she pondered silently. The vast, unpredictable wilds had been her home since birth, a place deemed hazardous by even the bravest. E-ranked chaos zones were dangerous enough to deter most beings, yet not lethal enough to be completely uninhabitable. The fog that lingered below, hiding the true threats, seemed to mock her confinement. Pandora knew little about her parents' past. Her father, Elias, was a celebrated hero, renowned for his impressive abilities. Yet, his heroism had been overshadowed by his choice to marry Serafina, a vampire of formidable power and mystery. The sparse details she had gleaned painted a picture of a love that transcended conventional boundaries but left her with more questions than answers. Her mother, Serafina, was a figure of elegance and strength, her vampiric nature evident in her features and abilities. Pandora knew that vampires were not a part of the mainstream human world, and her mother had made no effort to integrate with human society. This secrecy, combined with the isolation of their current home, fueled Pandora's growing sense of unease. The fact that they resided in a place like this, an E-ranked chaos zone, added another layer to her confusion. Despite the danger, they had chosen to stay here, away from both human and vampire societies. She understood that the humans might reject them due to her mother's nature, but she struggled to grasp why they would be shunned by the vampires as well. "Why don't we live with the vampires, if they would accept us?" Pandora wondered. The vampires, being as powerful as they were, would surely have been a more fitting place for them. Her parents had spoken of the dangers and the struggles of their past, but never of why they chose this life of seclusion. Elias could only endure a few days in the chaos zone's depths before the environment's harsh conditions began to take a toll on him. His time in the fog was limited, and even then, he had to be cautious to avoid lasting harm. Conversely, Pandora and her mother, with their vampiric resilience, could handle the weak chaos radiation almost indefinitely. This strange life they led seemed to be their compromise, allowing them to survive in a place where their abilities were less of a burden. Pandora sighed, closing her eyes as the exhaustion from the day's activities caught up with her. The dream of exploring beyond their limited world grew stronger with each passing day. The hammock, with its gentle sway and the rustling leaves above, provided a fleeting sense of comfort, but the unfulfilled questions remained, deep within her thoughts. She wondered what secrets lay hidden in the depths of their chaotic forest and longed for a day when she might finally uncover the truth. Pandora drifted off into a light sleep, the rhythmic sway of the hammock lulling her into a peaceful rest. Minutes later, a gentle shake roused her from her slumber. Her mother, Serafina, was standing on the wooden platform a short distance away, her long black hair shimmering in the fading light. "Pandora, it's time for dinner," Serafina called out, her voice carrying through the quiet evening. With a yawn, Pandora climbed out of the hammock and carefully stepped onto the thick branch. She made her way towards the wooden platform where Serafina stood. Her mother was still wearing only a loincloth, but Pandora had long grown accustomed to such sights. As Pandora approached the main building, she saw her father, Elias, at the table, the aroma of roasted venison filling the air. The table was laden with food, juicy meat, fresh vegetables, and a large glass of blood. Serafina was already drinking from her own glass, her eyes scanning the forest outside. Pandora joined them at the table, taking her seat and helping herself to a portion of meat and vegetables. She sipped from her glass of blood, savoring the familiar taste. The meal was a routine part of their lives, a small but comforting ritual. Elias cleared his throat, drawing Pandora's attention. His demeanor was serious, his usually confident expression tinged with unease. "Pandora," he began, "I think it's time we finally told you the truth about your origins." Pandora's eyes widened, and Serafina looked at her husband with a mixture of irritation and resignation. The atmosphere at the table shifted, the casual comfort of their dinner giving way to a more somber tone. Elias continued, "You've probably wondered why a human and a vampire could have a child. It doesn't make much sense, does it? The reality is, it shouldn't make sense. Your existence defies the natural order." Pandora lifted an eyebrow, clearly intrigued and somewhat skeptical. Elias took a deep breath and pressed on. "The truth is, your birth was the result of chaos energy. We wanted a child so desperately that, against all odds, we ended up with you. It was an anomaly, something that shouldn't have been possible. The biological differences between humans and vampires, our distinct physiological traits and abilities, should have made your birth impossible." He paused, looking at his daughter earnestly. "The chaos energy, which we don't fully understand how it came to be, played a critical role. It was a powerful force, and in its manifestation, it cost me one of my abilities and took away a fifth of your mother's magical power." Pandora's eyes widened in shock. The revelation that her parents had been weakened by her birth was staggering. "So, the love and desire you had for a child, it created this chaos energy and caused you to lose some of your powers?" she asked incredulously. Elias nodded solemnly. "Yes. The very thing that brought you into existence came at a great cost to us. It was a sacrifice born out of our deepest wishes, and while it's a part of our love story, it's also the reason we are confined to this E-ranked chaos zone." Pandora stared at her parents, trying to process the gravity of what she had just learned. Her heart was heavy with the weight of their sacrifices and the extraordinary circumstances of her birth. The revelation only deepened the questions she had about their isolated existence and the true nature of the world beyond their secluded home. Pandora listened intently to her father's unsettling revelation about their origins. As she chewed her food, she decided to seize the moment to get answers to her lingering questions about their isolated existence. Her curiosity had been piqued, and she was determined to understand the world beyond their hidden refuge. "Why don't we live with the vampires anymore?" Pandora asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. She looked at Serafina, hoping for clarity. Serafina's gaze softened, and she leaned forward slightly. "Pandora, we can't live with the vampires because they don't accept your father. My family, though powerful, has never welcomed him. The presence of a human, especially one as significant as Elias, was seen as a threat to their traditions and stability." Pandora nodded slowly, processing her mother's words. She then turned to Elias, her mind racing. "But why do the humans reject you so completely? Wouldn't it be possible for us to live among them while you stay here in the forest?" Elias sighed heavily, his expression growing somber. "Pandora, you need not worry about that. I was labeled a traitor by the Hero Alliance after my relationship with your mother became public. If I were to approach human settlements, it would almost certainly lead to conflict. They see me as a threat, someone who betrayed their trust." Pandora's eyes widened in shock. The idea that her father was considered a traitor, and that his mere presence could provoke conflict, was deeply unsettling. She had known her family's history was fraught with difficulties, but this revelation was more severe than she had anticipated. Her next question was one she had been mulling over for a while. What is chaos energy? Pandora inquired, her voice tinged with both fear and fascination. Both of her parents exchanged a glance, their expressions troubled. Chaos energy is something we don't fully understand, Serafina admitted. It's a force that bends or disregards the laws of our world. While it's often harmful to living beings, its primary function seems to be more complex. The true nature of chaos energy remains a mystery to us all. Pandora mulled over her parents' explanations, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. The more she learned, the more she realized how intricate and perilous their world truly was. As she absorbed the gravity of her parents' revelations, she knew that her journey to understand her place in this chaotic world was only just beginning. Pandora, still surprised by her parents' revelations, remained at the dining table. Her mind was racing with questions. Finally, she couldn't hold back her curiosity any longer. Dad, what was life like with the humans? Why did you fall in love with Mom? Pandora asked, her voice full of expectation. Her father, Elias, sighed and shook his head. Pandora, those are stories for another day, he said wearily. It's time for bed now. Elias yawned and stood up, while Serafina, Pandora's mother, also rose. They made their way together down the hall, ready to retire for the night. Pandora watched them as they ascended the stairs. After a while, Pandora herself stood up and slowly made her way up to her room. The fresh night air drifting through the window brought a cool relief. Pandora found it impossible to sleep, as the bright moonlight streaming through the window made it difficult. She shook herself awake and walked to the window. The moonlight illuminated her room, making her transparent nightgown almost like a veil. Even though she lived alone in the forest and had no concern about her clothing, she didn't want to risk her nightgown getting wet or dirty. Nevertheless, she was drawn outside. With a determined sigh, she opened the window and climbed out onto the wooden platform outside. There, she spotted a thick rope hanging from the platform, extending 30 meters down. The thought that, as a child of chaos energy, she might be resistant to it drove her forward. She grabbed the rope and began to carefully descend. Her hands burned from contact with the rope, but Pandora ignored the pain. When she reached the ground, her hands were smoking from the burns, but she didn't mind, as her injuries were healing quickly. Once on the ground, she noticed that the chaos energy in the form of the natural mist, which reached about 5 meters high, didn't affect her. Her thought was that she should be able to withstand this weak chaos energy. As she looked around, she felt a hunger inside her awaken. Driven by instinct, Pandora knelt down and gently touched one of the faintly glowing crystals on the ground. The moment her fingers brushed against its cool surface, the crystal began to react. It trembled slightly before cracking in her hand, breaking into tiny shards. The fragments hovered in the air momentarily before dissolving into even smaller particles, which floated away like dust in the wind. From the now dissolving crystal, a deep violet color began to seep out, a rich, wine-red hue of chaos energy. The liquid-like essence slowly bled into her hand, sinking into her skin. Pandora felt the energy seep through her veins, spreading like fire beneath her flesh. Her blood vessels glowed with a faint lilac light, illuminating her body from the inside out. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying, as her entire being pulsed with newfound power. As the violet energy coursed through her, Pandora's core, the very center of her power, began to stir. Deep within her chest, her heart throbbed, drawing in the energy. It wasn't just being absorbed, it was being devoured by something inside her, something far deeper than just her physical form. Her inner ability, the hidden sphere of chaos in her heart, expanded with every second, growing stronger as it consumed the essence of the crystal. Only after the crystal's energy had fully integrated into her did Pandora finally feel the effects of the surrounding mist. The natural chaos mist, which had been lingering around her, now descended upon her with a tangible force. It pressed against her, but unlike before, she wasn't merely resistant. Now, she could actively absorb it. The mist seemed to bend towards her, collapsing into her skin like water being sucked into dry earth. The hunger inside her deepened as the chaos mist was devoured, leaving nothing in its wake. And then came the lightning. Thin, purple bolts crackled around her, snaking along her skin and into the ground. One bolt climbed up her abdomen, splitting her nightgown as it traced her body. The power that surged within her was overwhelming, but Pandora stood tall, embracing the chaos as it filled her completely. Her sphere of power, buried deep in her heart, swelled as the energy from both the crystal and the mist flowed into it. Pandora stood there, breathless, as the mist around her began to swirl. The thick chaos energy, once calm and pervasive, started to take on a life of its own. The fog shifted into a vortex, spiraling around her in a tight formation. She watched in astonishment as the mist became denser and began rushing toward her with greater speed. Her inner ability, now surging with chaotic energy, reached a new peak. Pandora could feel it growing, expanding within her. She instinctively knew that her power had climbed to what must be an E-rank level, but the idea that this ability was linked to chaos still puzzled her. It felt so similar to any other supernatural power she'd heard of, one based on paranormal energy. How could this be chaos energy, the same force her father had warned her about? The spiraling mist around her grew thinner, its once dense and oppressive form becoming more transparent. Pandora felt her hair lift, floating around her face as if weightless, carried by the energy pulsing through her. Her heart raced as she reached her limit, her mind strained by the sheer intensity of the power coursing through her body. The chaos energy, however, responded to something deeper, an unspoken desire buried within her consciousness, a yearning to be human. Without warning, something inside her shifted. Her once silver-white hair, billowing in the air around her, darkened rapidly until it turned completely black. Her eyes, which had always glowed a striking violet, grew dull, the vibrant hue fading until they appeared normal, like any other human's eyes. The energy surrounding her slowly dissipated, and with it, the swirling vortex of mist began to calm. The fog grew thinner, almost transparent, as Pandora's body began to cool. She barely registered the chill of the night wind that swept over her. Her mind was numb, struggling to process everything that had just happened. A sudden gust of cold wind tore her from her daze. She looked down at herself, realizing that her nightgown had been affected by the chaos energy. It hadn't disintegrated completely, but the already sheer fabric was now riddled with holes where the lightning had scorched through. Great, Pandora muttered under her breath, how am I supposed to explain this to my parents? Not wanting to linger any longer, she hurried back toward the rope and climbed up, her hands still tingling from earlier burns. Once inside her room, Pandora slipped back into bed, but sleep was elusive. She couldn't shake what had just occurred, the strange and sudden shift within her, the power she'd unleashed. The urge to seek out more chaos crystals gnawed at her. Whatever had happened when she absorbed that crystal, it felt incomplete, like she had only scratched the surface. Lying there in the darkness, she could sense the presence of her ability more clearly now than ever before. It was like a deep well inside her, and if she focused hard enough, she could almost see it. Her ability sphere glowed in her mind's eye like a black sun, radiating faint purple light, a perfect embodiment of chaos. And it was hers.
Pandora lay in her bed, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't begin to answer. How is this possible? She wondered. Can something like an ability based on chaos energy even exist? Chaos, from what she understood, was the energy that defied or ignored the very laws of the world. If that were true, wouldn't the potential of this ability be limitless? What could I even do with this power? She thought, staring blankly at the ceiling as the moonlight dimmed. Pandora knew that every superpower had a specific function that defined it. Some people might have multiple abilities, sure, but she had only ever been aware of one. So what exactly is the nature of this chaos energy ability? She mused, feeling the faint hum of energy still coursing through her. Does it produce energy like other abilities? But if that's true, wouldn't it be producing chaos energy? That thought stuck with her, though it confused her even more. How does that even make sense? I just absorbed chaos. Devoured it, really. How can a power both create and consume the same energy? And then a more immediate problem entered her mind, making her stomach knot. How am I going to explain this nightgown? She thought bitterly, glancing down at the torn, scorched fabric. And I look human now. What if I can't turn back into a vampire? What if my parents don't even recognize me and think I'm some intruder? Her heart raced at the thought, and she tossed and turned, trying to find a solution. The room began to lighten as dawn broke, the stars fading behind the pale blue sky. With a groan, Pandora sat up, knowing she'd barely slept. There was only one option. She'd have to tell her mother the truth. I have to find a way to explain it, she thought, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. But how could she? Even she didn't fully understand what had happened. Pandora sighed, realizing that there was no hiding it. She'd just have to hope her parents would believe her. Before she could face them, though, she had to figure out how to turn back into her vampire form. She paced around the room, concentrating hard, but nothing happened. Panic began to creep in, but she didn't stop trying. After 30 minutes of struggling, a flicker of determination sparked within her, and the shift happened. Relief flooded through her as her body transformed back into its vampiric state. Then, something clicked in her mind, a sudden realization that made her stop in her tracks. Emotions. It was the love her parents had for each other that had created her through chaos energy. That had to mean that emotions, desires, were somehow tied to how chaos energy worked. And last night, when she transformed into a human, it was because of her deep, unconscious wish to be one. So that's the key, she thought, her heart racing again, this time with excitement. I can switch between being a vampire and a human if I focus on that need, that feeling. Pandora wasted no time. She left her room and headed straight for her parents. When she reached the kitchen, her father, Elias, and her mother were already there, quietly sipping their morning tea. Pandora took a deep breath and approached them in her vampire form. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice firm but laced with uncertainty. Her parents looked at her, puzzled. Before they could ask what she meant, Pandora closed her eyes and focused. She called upon that deep desire to be human again, the feeling of wanting to fit in, to be normal. Slowly, she felt the shift happen again. Chaos energy swirled around her, enveloping her like a warm breeze, and when she opened her eyes, she was human once more. Her parents stared at her, their expressions frozen in disbelief. Her mother, still holding her cup of tea, slowly lowered it, eyes wide. Elias's brow furrowed in confusion, his mouth slightly open as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. How is that possible?" Her mother finally whispered, her voice shaking. "You're a vampire, Pandora. You've always been a vampire. How can you just turn human?" Pandora finished, looking down at herself. "I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me either. But it happened last night. I think it has something to do with the chaos energy." Elias leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Chaos energy? You mean you've been manipulating chaos?" Pandora nodded, swallowing hard. "I think so. I absorbed a chaos crystal last night, and after that, I just knew I could change. I'm not sure how, but it's tied to my emotions. When I feel a certain way, I can shift between forms." Her mother's hands trembled as she set down her cup. "Pandora, that's impossible. No one can do that, not even with chaos energy. It's unpredictable, uncontrollable." "But I can control it," Pandora insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I just did." Elias shook his head slowly, his face still clouded with confusion. "Pandora, this defies everything we know about chaos. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't obey like other powers. How can you possibly control something like that?" "I don't know," Pandora admitted, her voice softer now. "But I can, and I think it's because of how I was born. Chaos energy responds to emotions, and because of that, I can make it do what I want." Her parents exchanged a long, uncertain glance. They were silent for what felt like an eternity, both of them struggling to comprehend what their daughter had just shown them. Finally, Elias spoke again, his voice quiet but filled with concern. "This changes everything." That wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to share my channel with all your friends. If you'd like to hear more parts of this reimagined story, let me know in the comments below. Now, if you click on the video to the left, you'll be taken to the latest upload on my channel. If you click on the video to the right, you'll find the playlist. Right at the top in the middle of the screen, you'll see the link to my YouTube channel. Hopefully, you'll discover even more interesting stories there. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Until next time, take care and goodbye.